So what should we do when we spot a duplication in our QuickBooks file that's caused by automation? Well, we need to understand why that automation has caused a problem, just to prevent it in the future, but also how we correct that kind of error that's arisen within the file. So if we go to the little gear in the top right here, and I go to chart of accounts, we can have a look at an error in here. So if I go to my number 2 account, and at the end of the row I run a report on activity in this particular account, it gives me the last 90 days, and as I go down this list here, you'll see that I've got an entry that jumps out. There's no marker against that entry to say that it's ticked off in the bank reconcile, and if I look at it, it looks that as if I've got two amounts for £10 on the same day. Here one says post office, the other hasn't got a name on it, so it could be related to it, could not. This one's got a C, so it's got a marker on it to say it's ticked in the bank reconcile, which implies that it may well have come through from an automated bank feed. This one's got no marker at all. So we can drill into these transactions to see whether we've got a problem here with a duplication. So if I look at the first transaction, the one marked with a C, and I click on there on the expense, it will drill into this transaction. Just by clicking on it, it will drill in. So I can see there's no pay name. I do recommend that as we put these in, we do add to the pay name. I know it does say that it's optional, but I like to do that normally. But here the blue marker indicates that it's come through from the bank feed. And if I click on the blue marker, it will tell me the date, which agrees with the date on here, and it is the post office that's come through. So it is the same name as on the other transaction. So this transaction has come through the bank feed. It's got a marker here to suggest that, and we know that that's fed into the bank. So that transaction looks fine. We go down below here, there's no attachment to the transaction, which could well be your policy, but we normally check whether there's an attachment before we would potentially change any transaction. So that transaction there, it's got a C against it. There's no name on it, but it looks like a sensible transaction. This transaction here, if I click on that one, same date, again, post office, same amount, and I click on there, this is giving me another. This one's not got a blue marker here, so this implies that it's a manual transaction. It's not come through from the bank feed. So unless we've spent £10 twice at the post office on that day, in which case we possibly have put it to the wrong account. It could have been a cash payment, that kind of thing. We could have two receipts, but if we've only got one receipt, then this looks like a duplication. Again, there's no receipt attached to it. But if we're confident we've only spent one lot of £10 on that day through the bank, we could remove this transaction as being a duplicate. And we could do that from the bottom and click more. And we've got options here, avoiding it, which will make it a zero entry but keep the record, or deleting it, in which case it would be removed, but the record of it would still be in the audit. Yeah. So again, voiding or deleting here, it is a duplication. We can get rid of it. So I'm going to delete that. I use sure. Now, if this was in a closed period, a period that we'd protected the data for, it would warn me at this stage that I'm deleting something in a closed period. So just be careful you're not deleting something from a period that the accountant has already prepared accounts for. But this is in the current month, so I'm quite happy to delete that transaction, and that removes it from the list here. You can see that it's no longer on my list through the bank account and has corrected it. So that's identifying and dealing with a duplication that's come through, one entry from the automation, one from a manual transaction. Another thing to consider when you do that is which of the entries to remove. So if you've got a situation potentially where a transaction has been brought in perhaps through the receipts in here and has got the entry attached to it, but there's also an entry come through from the bank feed as well, we might want to keep the one with the receipt. So the one that's got the marker as a C might not be the one that we want, and we might end up removing the entry that's been run through the bank and retaining the one that came through with the receipt attached, and we then have to do some work to match that entry to the entry coming through the bank. So that can get a little bit more complicated in identifying which one you want to keep. But this example was relatively simple. The one that was done manually was the duplication that we wanted to remove at this stage, and it's no longer duplicating in the bank run. So that's looking at duplication of expenses caused by automation.